My professor is 65 and approaching her retirement. She has a collection of salt and pepper shakers. I don't need it, thank you. A collection of salt and pepper shakers of all sorts of unique sets and pairs. She recently decided it was time to downsize, since this collection of hers was taking up space and collecting dust. So she first offered them to her family members, but their reaction, it really surprised her. Was she sick? What wasn't she telling them? Was she okay? In the US, when someone shows even the slightest sign of confronting their mortality, it sets us into a panic. Whether it's as big as writing a will or as small as offloading some possessions, we consider it wrong, negative, that somehow talking about death invites it. It hasn't always been this way. A core idea in sociology is that reality is socially constructed, meaning that much of what we take for granted as a normal aspect of life may actually not be so normal after all, that instead it's shaped by a shared meaning in that society. Now, this is the case for small things in life, such as what's okay to eat for breakfast or wear as a wedding guest, but it also affects some of the biggest parts of our lives. And sociology has two ways of identifying something as socially constructed. The first is that it varies across time. The second is that it varies across place. Now, biological death is not socially constructed. It's in the name. It's biological, concrete. It has not varied across time or place. However, death is not only biological. It is highly cultural. In the culture of death, that has been a source of wide variation. For much of human history, death has been an ever-present part of our daily lives. Part of this is that death wasn't confined to older age in the same way that we think of it today. Death swept across everyone all the time. Mothers and infants died in childbirth. Children grew up seeing death up close. And family members were intimately involved in caring for their loved one's body. Death was a communal event, a familiar one, that brought people together and actually put life in perspective. This isn't how we encounter death today. In fact, for many of us, we don't encounter death today. We've outsourced our dying people to care facilities, hospitals, and other institutions. And our deceased people, we do the same. Whether by active choice or not, we pass them along to the funeral industry. In the few instances where we do encounter death, it's often highly regimented. Consider an American funeral. We wear black, formal clothes. We may bring flowers, food, gifts, our condolences. We may view a lifelike body, but did you catch it? Only after it's been made lifelike. What was once highly visible is now hidden. What was once an expected part of our life that brought us together is now met with avoidance. But here's the thing. Death itself has not gotten scarier with the progression of time. We just stopped looking at it. The research shows us that avoiding death only makes it harder to face, and that when we do consider this pattern of avoidance, our final moments become ones of crisis. Did you know that 90% of Americans wish to die at home? Only about 20% of us do. The majority of us still die in hospitals. It's the number one place of death. Often, although not always, after intense intervention aimed at prolonging our life, when in reality, much of what we do is prolong your death. This applies to wills and advance directives as well. Only about 30% of us have one. And while many more than that 30% say that they plan to, maybe thinking they're too young or it's not the right time. But is that not a denial, an avoidance of death in and of itself? Now that we've talked about the current situation in the US and how we've gotten here across time, let's look across cultures. In Switzerland and the Netherlands, these end-of-life conversations happen much differently. They happen both with family and friends, as well as our healthcare providers. In fact, general practitioners make these conversations a part of routine care. That means that these conversations don't happen at the 11th hour. They happen longitudinally. They're made accessible. And a US study asked Americans who they would most want to talk about their end-of-life wishes with. And it was surprising. Compared to family and friends, healthcare providers were the #1 choice. And this tells me that this model could potentially translate to the US, giving us at least one avenue to make these conversations happen. Another interesting statistic is from the National Partnership for Healthcare and Hospice Innovation. In a sample of 2,000 adults over the age of 35, 89% of them considered themselves equally or more comfortable talking about death than an average peer. 89%. Now, that's a whole lot more than what we would expect on a standard bell curve distribution. And what this tells me is that the stigma around death is more powerful than our individual attitudes. That I may feel more comfortable talking about death than I feel is okay to portray socially. So then I don't, and I take a step back and don't have the conversation. And then you look around and nobody's having the conversation. And you may be thinking, well, of course nobody is having these conversations. It's awkward, it's morbid. And to that, I would say, maybe it is. But what if it also makes us more human, more connected to each other, more prepared and able to be present at the end of life? Now, my field of gerontology, the study of aging, has long separated itself from dying. That aging is not dying. Part of this was an important and necessary effort, because we're right, aging is not dying. Later life is a profoundly meaningful time for so many people. However, this should matter to gerontologists, because the most common age to die in the US is 85 and 89 for men and women. So is combating ageism the same thing as avoiding this conversation and not talking about death? No. Neither is acknowledging death as a reality that we all face somehow giving up on the hope in life. Luckily, there is a shift happening, with more people like myself seeing this discrepancy and wanting to do something to change it in the next generation of gerontologists and all workers in aging services. I've been asked by several people if I think that science will ever put an end to this conversation, if it'll ever stop aging and dying. And to that, I have a resounding no, but not for lack of trying. There are hundreds, if not thousands of researchers working on it right now as we speak. However, the body is not made for permanence. It never was and it never will be. To change that would have catastrophic effects on the structure and function of our society. So I want us to think back to that fear that my professor's family felt when she offered them her salt and pepper shakers, that she was being morbid by doing that. Let's think back to that. I don't think that fear was in its entirety about her. I think it was about them. I think it's about us. That we are the product of a culture that across time has forgotten how to sit with the idea that life is temporary. If I leave you with anything, please let it be this. I encourage you to have the conversation, to stop putting things off for an abstract day in the future that may or may not come. Because the hardest part for all of us is when we continue this pattern of avoidance. We don't have to be scared of our salt and pepper shakers. Now, I don't think anybody can truly know the meaning of life. So, for that matter, neither can I. I do have a hypothesis at what gives life meaning. What gives life meaning is that it ends. And when we acknowledge that, our lives truly begin. Thank you.